Awesome. We are now recording. So welcome everybody. I just want to introduce myself quickly. My name is Benny. I'm joining from the Playground team. For those who might not be familiar, we will be at the upcoming quarterly summit, quarterly event in Clearwater if you're there. But we are a childcare software on a goal to help you centralize all of your operations into one spot. Everything from managing multiple sites, staff. We're coming out with payroll pretty soon, paperwork, billing, all that sort of fun stuff in one place. We're one of the newer companies in this space. And as a result, a lot of our technology is really innovative, really fast. We have artificial intelligence involved. The idea is really just to save administrators time. And also, we work with organizations like Child Care Success Summit to put on events like this one. And so we're very excited to welcome Coach Jennifer Slavin from the Child Care Success Company to share a bit about how to boost staff morale and increase retention. I know staffing is a huge issue at a lot of centers across the country. So it's important to empower our staff, and I'm sure Jen has plenty of experience to share with us. So Jen, if you want to take it away.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I will screen share. And since we have kind of a more intimate group, I might be asking for some participation. And that way you can really walk away with your answers and sort of maybe some ideas and some extra support. So we're going to be running through how to elevate and sustain your employees, proven strategies to boost your staff retention, morale, and get lasting success. So for those of you who are not familiar with me, I am Coach Jen Slavin with the Child Care Success Company. And up here to the left is my beautiful family, who I consider the best gift in the world. I have 4 children, my wonderful husband, and without their support, I couldn't do or be anything that I am here today. I started out working when I created my own business at age 11 called The Best Babysitter. And I created a magnet with a business card on it and a letter just explaining all the services that I would offer. And I rode around on my bicycle in my neighborhood and put that on every mailbox that I could possibly find in my neighborhood to advertise. And needless to say, I got a lot of business that summer. But that catapulted me, flash forward into college. And I was at a friend that was like, hey, my daycare is hiring. Do you want to help in the afternoons? And I walked in thinking I'd fill out an application, but instead they were like, hey, just go to the toddler classroom until 6, because, we all desperately need employees without paperwork or any sort of interview. So I jumped right in, and that's actually where I met a little girl and her family who ended up purchasing a childcare center and had asked me to take over as director when they purchased it. And so I jumped on board with that ride, and we went from 1 to 9 centers in my tenure with them, and I became the vice president of the company. I got to lead a leadership team of 25 people, and obviously go through so many wonderful and amazing experiences, which has built up over the 17 years that I was there. In 2016, we joined the Child Care Success Company, which within a year or so, I knew I wanted to become a coach. I always felt that leaders within our organization needed a support system. And so you can see in 2020, I joined the team. I always bring the sparkle. That's that picture of me on the right. I always carry some sparkles with me. But our team there in the middle, our coaching team, we reached 1 million children last year. So super excited to be a part of that company and be able to inspire so many leaders across the world. So in order to support you today in elevating and sustaining your staff and boosting that retention and morale, we are going to cover the following, which is insight into your employees' needs and develop the ability to identify factors that will significantly contribute to the employee satisfaction and their well-being. We'll also have an understanding of the true cost of employee turnover, so recognizing that there's a financial and operation impact that imposes it. And then the essential components and benefits of constructing a positive work culture within your organization, and the importance of investing in career development and training to actively support the growth of your employees, and how pivotal leadership in shaping the growth of our employees and cultivating a culture that is truly worth being a part of. Let me kick it off with a nice little quote. I believe that when reading this, I just really resonated with me, because sometimes we always hear clients first, customer service. But Richard Branson, which we're all familiar with, said clients don't come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of the clients. And especially in childcare and in a lot of my experiences, one thing that I used to always try to train my directors on, or, encourage them to really realize, if my teachers were taken care of, then I could do my job, right? If my team had the tools, the resources, and everything that they needed, then I knew that I could focus on what I needed because they were taken care of. And, to some extent, the children are our clients, as much as the parents are our clients. So looking at how you're really shifting your internal self to be able to give your team what they need. So just to make this a little more interactive and kick it off to make sure you can pull out what you want, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing right now within your schools?
Even getting people in the door. Interviews are just, they'll schedule, but then they never show. We've been trying to call to remind them of interviews, and that's been a huge struggle here in Omaha.
We do have that same issue as well, just getting people to come in for the interviews, and then I don't know if sometimes they're just applying to apply and then they change their mind, but there's no communication. So that's been tough.
Thank you. Anybody else? You're here. All right. Well,
I'll talk. I'll say something really quickly. I'm the HR manager for some daycares in Pennsylvania, and we have 8. And I've spent all morning working on retention and turnover numbers, and we're doing a lot better with retention. But we're still having a lot of turnover. So I think that even though we have our OGs, we have our employees that have been with us a year or 2 years, 5 years, those people who come are leaving very quickly. Some of the newer hires. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to keep the new people that we're onboarding. And I think it's getting better, but it's still just a struggle. So that's what I'm looking for here is, that helping with morale and strategies, to keep people happy.
No, that's awesome. No, thank you.
It's a very broad statement, but I feel like we have to work for our employees anymore. They don't come to work for us. It's what do you have to give me to make my day great and perfect, but not what we need sometimes, which is definitely a struggle.
Awesome. Thank you. No, thank you so much for sharing. So I think we'll touch on most of it. So let's just dive into some things. So first, understanding employee needs. It's that foundation of the satisfaction. So when you're looking at your employees that are, currently there, because this is a lot going to be applying to like the current employees. So I can touch on getting the employees in the door too at the end. But that foundation of satisfaction and creating that foundation as soon as you possibly can would be most important. So that goes into recognition and appreciation, opportunities for growth, work-life balance, and positive work environment. These seem to be the top 4 things that people are looking for when they're looking at joining a corporation or joining a school. And so finding ways that you can acknowledge the employees for their contributions, for, kind of the above and beyond that they do, and really understanding what that means to somebody. And we'll dive a little bit more into that in a little bit. So I'll leave some of those ideas for a little bit later. Opportunities for growth. So finding those avenues for professional development and career building. A lot of times when we're working in childcare, the staff that come in, for example, even in my story, I wasn't necessarily looking to build a career in childcare. I had my own aspirations. I was in college. I was thinking I was going to go, to be a kindergarten teacher. I was going to teach in a school. And I had different thoughts about what my actual outcome could be. And it wasn't until somebody actually looked, and it wasn't my current center. It was somebody outside the center. It was a parent of a child that was in my classroom that had seen something in me that I didn't even necessarily, know or see in myself. And so I think that a lot of times when we're thinking about the employees that work for us, and you just maybe even think of the communities that you're involved in, as a parent of 4 little children, that attend school, it's really weird sometimes to interact with the other parents there, because adults, you think, have it really easy. Like they can talk, they understand, we, can conceptualize things more. But adults really have a hard time making relationships and making connections, because it's kind of weird and awkward. We're all set in our own ways. And so finding people that will pull those things out of you. So if you see somebody that's working for you and you're seeing that they're falling short of something, really tackling that from the foundation and saying, I see that they're really misstepping here, within the first week. They always say in marriage, right? Whatever's happening in dating is going to just magnify itself when you get married, right? It's not necessarily, marriage is not going to fix that. The longer you're together is not going to fix that. A lot of times those things get magnified, those little things that you kind of thought would go away. And that's kind of how I feel when you have an employee start within your organization. You're starting to see those little disconnects in the beginning, finding ways to pull that out of them and finding ways to be able to help grow them and say, I see that you're struggling with this, and kind of have a conversation around it, see why they're struggling, get their perspective and understand what's going on from the root of the problem from the beginning. And then you're able to kind of build out how you can help them grow. Some of my favorite Cinderella stories are kind of those underdog employees that have come in and we've had some of the most difficult issues with them, but then they end up being our like longest term employees, the best, employees, and they're usually like mentor teachers and things like that because they've become so successful. But it's because in the beginning, somebody cared about looking at where are those disconnects, where are those gaps for growth, and how can I help them? Work-life balance is something that is hard to tackle because, it's really not something that we can gift anybody, right? That work-life balance really has to come from within, and it has to come from looking at what every individual really wants and needs. So when we're hearing that people want work-life balance, I believe that this just needs to be part of your conversation. Work-life balance is important to us as a culture within our organization. What does that mean and look like for you? I was the person that would have opened and closed 5 days a week. I would have done the extra. I would have worked at nights and the weekends, because when I initially started working, I was trying to support myself as a young college student, or, as a post-college student initially. And so, all the money I could get to support myself was what mattered to me. But then people's lives shift and change, and sometimes they can happen really rapidly. So looking at how are you meeting with your employees? How often are you meeting with them? And how much are you touching base with them and saying, how's this feeling for you? Is this still working for you? Because again, sometimes as employees, we're nervous to bring something to our owner's attention. We're nervous to have those conversations about how we might need to change, what we're doing. Sometimes we start to disconnect ourselves, they say silently quitting before you even have the conversation, because they're thinking, no, they're never going to change my hours, or they're never going to understand my situation. So always just keeping, for me, that work-life balance is a conversation. It's the one-on-one, and it's how you are touching base with everybody and saying, what can we do to support you? What does support look like for you on my end? The positive work environment. So this is just really the bread and butter to it all. Just having that culture that fosters collaboration, respect, positivity, understanding, support. Sometimes it even just comes down to, do they have all the materials that they need to be able to do their daily functions? Do they have the tissues, the wipes, the diapers? Like, do they have all those little things? And what can you do? What systems can you put in place? What measures can you put in place to ensure that they have all of those things? The positivity, you are your surrounding, whoever you surround yourself with is really who you end up elevating yourself to be. And that goes the same for your work environment. If the work environment is always down and dull, then that's how your employees are going to feel. So sometimes bringing the extra positivity, that's where the glitter started from. I used to walk around and sprinkle people with glitter just to brighten up their day. So it's silly things like that, then that just kind of became the norm. I also used to ask, I would walk around every morning to say hello to my team, and I'd say, what's new and good? And people got accustomed to that. Well, one morning I was in a rush, and I'll never forget this story, because then I never stopped asking. I didn't ask the question, what's new and good, because I was in a rush. I was thinking about what I was doing. I had a lot of fires going on. And the one employee came to me about an hour later and she's like, I'm just really upset. You never asked me what was new and good. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I just, I was focused on this. I go, what's new and good? And she goes, well, I got engaged and I was really excited to tell you. And of course, right, the one day that I don't ask, and I just felt so horrible. But those are the things that really, she probably thought all morning, I can't wait for Jen to walk in and say, what's new and good. So looking at how are you setting up some habits, some patterns in ways that you're going to cultivate that culture. So looking at how you can, and if you're not the person that's necessarily doing this on the day-to-day, how can you shape this long-term satisfaction for your team? How can you pass on, even if if you're the one that's kind of overseeing it, how do you empower your team? I feel that that's through example. Are you doing these things for the people that are reporting to you? Are you supporting your team in these ways that they can then, it's kind of that trickle down or ripple effect, where that they can also then take that and apply that to those that they're working with. Did it not switch? Oh, sorry. Okay, so the next is that cost of employee turnover. And this is, I know Christy said she's running numbers this morning. And I think that this is a really deceptive thing, especially when it comes to our employees understanding it. So counting those hidden costs, recruitment and training expenses, the loss of productivity, and the impact that has on your team. Sometimes having this conversation with your teachers and helping them really understand, because they really do play a part of it as well. It's a part of the whole big culture. But looking at, you're going to have, financial burden associated with sourcing out the hiring, the training of the new employees. So making sure that you're tracking these areas so that way you can see and find your hidden costs and where you feel that you're losing the most money, right? Loss of productivity. So when you have that high turnover, you lose that momentum that's happening in the classroom. Sometimes you lose that consistency. It really shakes the children, definitely usually shakes the parents because they're, really unknown what's going to happen, who's going to take care of my child. And then there's this emotional toll that happens on the team where the remaining team members, they are either upset, they're happy, there's kind of mixed emotions. But then it kind of really affects the flow of things, because then maybe you start to realize, oh, so-and-so that's no longer here used to do this. Now that's not happening. And things are starting to fall through the cracks. So just making sure that you have really looked at your budgets, where it's going, and finding where's the cost really weighted, where is it showing that it's the highest issue, and then kind of dissecting your issue from there, where you might be able to say, let's look back at this and say, let's try to fix this area because it seems to be costing us the most in the line of the cost of turnover. All right, building a positive work culture. So this is absolutely one of my favorite things that, I did and got to do, but it's that bedrock of the retention and morale. So the key points really are the clear communication, inclusive leadership, employee empowerment, and transparent policies. Communication just comes down to, are you being as open, honest, and transparent as you possibly can? What core values do you have within your organization that you could fall back on and say, this is how I'm going to operate in my communication? I would give as much information as I physically possibly could without it crossing any lines. And largely because why would what was the purpose of leaving anybody with any questions? And sometimes when people don't over communicate or don't communicate enough, it's coming from a place of, want to have respect, want to have, that kind of authority or that power. Sometimes it's just coming from a place of distraction or even negligence, right? So looking at you and your team and how are you communicating? What are the channels that you're using? Is it that you need to clean up these areas so that way the employees don't leave feeling like, well, it's not, I never knew what was going on at that place. I didn't really understand. When you have multiple locations, it can feel really spread thin, especially the top leadership. I used to think that the schools would be running fine. But then I found out that when I didn't visit, for maybe a certain period of time, it would upset people. They would look forward to seeing me, and I didn't realize how much they wanted to see me. But nobody was telling me that. So, it only came out the one time when she's like, I'm so glad you're here. I've really missed you. And I'm like, I had no idea, so it just looking at how can you empower somebody, even give you the hard feedback of things that are going on. So empowering your team, giving them those lines of communication that are open, that are honest, that are transparent. Inclusive leadership. So this is where it values that like diversity and that opportunity for everybody to have a voice. And I feel that if you're not the director in the center that's really dealing with like the day-to-day and in that, this is really where sometimes the line stops, because you have directors or leaders that are running schools that aren't open-minded and are sort of kind of taking the my way or the highway approach. And so looking at how can you train your leaders within your organization by helping them understand that hearing somebody, listening to somebody, allowing those different views to come in is extremely important. So that way we can make sure that everybody's at least heard, everybody is understood, and everybody's opinion actually matters and is valued. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to change the outcome or that that's going to be the defining factor in the decision that might need to be made or whatever might be going on at the school. But it really helps give everybody that voice and understand that that's important. And it's very simple by just saying, I really want to hear what you have to say about this, and showing them that you care and showing them that their voice is important for you to hear. Taking those notes down so they see that you value what they're saying, and then helping them through those. Sometimes you're going to find out things that you didn't even know. They're just going to start opening up, and then you're going to realize you might be able to catch something at the foundation before it turns into a larger problem. Employee empowerment. So providing that like autonomy to make decisions and giving your employees, the authority to be able to like make decisions. One thing that I always say is like, sometimes we try to plan out every single thing. We want every classroom or every school or everything to feel the same because we're trying to create this culture. We're trying to create this, this system. And sometimes it's just too much because you have so many different versions of teachers. You have different personalities, you have different backgrounds, you have different mindsets. And so just really looking at their strengths individually and saying, where can I empower them? You might have somebody who's really great at lesson planning and somebody who's really awful at lesson planning. Those would be a great pair to bring together, right? That one that's great with lesson planning can help train and give ideas and show them and empower them on their strength. But then you might have somebody else who's really good at transitions. Allow them to share some of their ideas that they use to transition the children throughout the building. So finding ways that you can highlight their strengths that you're noticing, that you're observing, and let them share those at a staff meeting, maybe highlight them in newsletters, and just finding ways that you can empower them to be able to make certain decisions within their classrooms and showcase that. The other thing that I always say when it comes to allowing your staff to make decisions, my biggest thing is if it's not going to sink the ship, then let them do it, right? Because if they hit below the waterline, your ship is going to sink. So obviously it's a supervision issue. They can't have that could sink your ship. Just looking at different things to help define that out for your team. What would sink our ship? What wouldn't? If they have to push back lunch a little bit or change their play time or switch an activity and it kind of goes off schedule because there's a behavior issue in the classroom, or a student was running late and a parent held them up. Like there's so many factors that happen in a day with our teachers that we don't even know about because we're not necessarily experiencing them. Allow them to make those decisions, make those pivots, empower them to do that. And the biggest part of that is going to be notice that they're doing it and recognize them for it. Transparent policies. So are your policies clearly defined? Do they all understand what they are? And ultimately, are you both on the same page with expectations? Because the dress code can mean one thing to me, but I could read, like somebody else can read that and that means something totally different. So looking at how can I be as transparent as possible and how can I clearly define my expectations when it comes to these policies. And that's also where you start to lose people, because they come into the organization, they don't read your policies because you have a 100-page policy book. They don't, like, most of the employees coming these days aren't going to sit and read your 100-page book, even though they sign it and say that they read it, or even though they sign it and say that they agree to it. Have touch points of going over your policies. Create a system where, you know, on day one, you're covering your top 10 to 20 policies that you need this employee to know. And go through your handbook and say, these are the most important, you know, dress code, supervision, zero tolerance, you know, just things like that, that would help you realize these, I need to know that they really understand what they are. Sit down, have a clear conversation, and go through that. Excuse me. And ask them, do you have a question? Do you understand what this means? Do you have any questions? And allow time and space right from the beginning for them to get clarification around that and what that means. But then don't let that fall apart. Once you've gone all over those, ensure that at your monthly staff meetings, you are continuously going through your handbook, and each staff meeting that you are pulling all of your policies. So within a year, you've covered all of your policies, and you're reading through them and allowing the staff to have time to ask questions. And review them often to make sure that they are still applicable. So finding just these little ways that you can build that positive work culture based on all the things that are necessary in the day-to-day. Employee recognition. So fostering that culture of appreciation, which again, this is the fun stuff. So looking at things like you could do Employee of the Month or peer-to-peer acknowledgement, celebrating milestones. I could definitely go through, you know, on and over. I think finding different ways, and really extraordinary ways, that can help them feel that they are in a culture of appreciation. One of the biggest things that I want you to take away, and I would love for you to challenge yourself and your team with, is a practice of noticing. And it's simply just, it's almost like an observation, right? But it's like when a child comes in the morning and, you know, they kind of seem sad, you could be like, oh my goodness, look at that pretty dress that you're wearing today. And it's just that you notice something simple about the child that might uplift them, right? We do that very naturally. And it's so easy to do it with the children because they're so cute and we just love them so much. And they're the reason that we're there, right? I challenge you to take that to your staff and look at how every single day you could notice something about your staff that, you know, is different, you know, from the day before. It could be, oh my gosh, look at this project that you did that's hanging on the wall here. I really love how the kids were able to just kind of explore and, you know, and express themselves artistically. This is great. This is so nice. And it could just be like, oh my gosh, I see, did you do something different with your hair? Or, oh, I love the sweater that you're wearing today. It can be very simple, but it's something that if you practice this art of noticing, where you're noticing something simple each day about your staff, or trying to, you know, for just the sake of it, intentionally find something that you can do to connect with that staff person on a day-to-day basis. Those are the things that lay the foundation of a culture that really cares, a culture that is appreciating you. So looking at how you can intentionally do that, and that will leave you with that connection that you're looking for. Career development and training. So investing in professional growth. I'm sure that there's probably a lot of things that you do in terms of state, you know, mandatory trainings, but you know, it's really hard because you do have to get those done, and their expectations of the state, their requirements that you have to go through. But if you think about yourself and you think back, you know, across your career and what you've experienced, what have been the most impactful times that you have had, and where you have felt, wow, I'm truly growing in my professionalism, in my career, in my mindset. If you think back on those times where you have been most impacted, try to recreate or bring something similar to your team, because it isn't going to be that you're going to invest in, you have training programs, you have mentor opportunities, skill advancement workshops, but it's going to be the above and beyond those. So these right here are kind of the basics of that. What is it that has really inspired you to want to grow or to want to be the person that does more for your school? That's what I'm going to challenge you to try to find how you can emulate that with your staff. I am huge on staff activities, like just silly team building activities that allow the team to laugh with one another, play with one another, even kind of like, it's funny, like when you fail at something, I like this stacking cup game that you do with rubber bands and strings, and you keep failing and failing. And just like the fact that you continuously start laughing at each other because you can't do it. And it's fun. It just kind of builds that engagement with each other. But those types of growth are going to allow your staff to be more connected with you, to feel like they're more part of something bigger. But that right there is going to be the foundation that will then allow them to soak in all of those other trainings that are mandatory, because then they're going to actually care about the content that they're learning, that they need to learn. Otherwise, it's always going to feel like they have to learn this part of something that matters. You're more likely to be open and, willing to soak it in. It's so much similar to the children that we work with. Whenever they feel loved and they really feel cared for, the more they're going to listen, the more they're going to cooperate, the more that they're going to take away, and the more that they're going to develop. So if you just kind of look at your teachers like the same, like a sponge, when the sponge is not in warm water, it's really hard. But when you warm that sponge up, it gets nice and soft and it'll soak up all the water real quickly. And that's what I want to challenge you to do, is kind of find ways where you can grow them in their development, in their professional growth, and those connections, so that way they can soak in all of this external professional growth. Leadership's role in morale. So what is actually your role and how are you navigating that? So guiding the way. Approachability, effective communication, leading by example, and then advocacy for your employees. So approachability. I really challenge you to ask your team, and it could be by a blank survey, because you wouldn't want to necessarily know who feels this way. Do you feel that I'm approachable? Or do you feel that your supervisor is approachable? And I think that small little question will open up a lot, especially when it comes to you as a leader in your role and how you play that in your morale. Do your staff find you approachable? If they do not, then you have a lot of work to do on yourself. It's not necessarily the work that you have to do on your team, right? And you have people leaving, not necessarily because they're the problem, but more so because their leadership is the issue. So that would be a great thing to find from the beginning, what might be going on, and try to decipher through everything. Another great question is, do you feel that I, clearly communicate, or that I'm open about communication? So finding and measuring ways that you can hear from your team directly to understand if they really feel that you are clear in your communication. How do they like to be communicated with? Do they like to be communicated on your parent communication or your school communication platform, maybe Playground? Do they like to be communicated with Slack? Do they like email? Do they like text? Do they like face-to-face? Some people really struggle with communication. So finding ways that are also alternatives, and also doing multiple different ways of communication, and not just saying, well, I told you in the staff meeting. People need lots of different reminders, because otherwise they're going to forget. And a lot of times they'll hear the information, but they're not retaining the information. So finding ways where you can really make it easier for them to be held accountable for it by supplying multiple avenues for communication. Leading by example. So are you demonstrating the values and the behaviors that you expect from your employees? And I know that we always think that we are, right? We always have the best intention, but how are you reacting to fires that are being thrown your way? How are you reacting when situations come across your plate and it's derailing your day? How are you reacting when you don't necessarily have all the information, and so you feel stuck in that situation? So looking at your behaviors, looking at the values that you are emulating, are you reactive versus proactive? Because reactive isn't necessarily leading by example, but being proactive and maybe sometimes pausing and giving yourself time to breathe before you react will allow yourself to really understand, what is it that I want to intentionally say in this moment, as opposed to, let me slap a Band-Aid on it, or ultimately you could have a reaction that could harm the relationship. advocacy for your employees. Do they feel that you are their cheerleader? Do they feel that you are in their corner? Do they feel that you are against them? You know, these are some things that I would say would be really great to look at through the eyes of your teacher and understand what they are going through on the day-to-day. A great way to do this is in one-on-ones. You can say, walk me through your day, you know, go through, tell me what you do in one day, and ask questions along the way. You know, how did that go for you? How did that feel? What did that look like? Did you feel you had enough resources? You know, what do you feel that we could have done better in that moment, or your supervisor could have done better? And this is one of my favorite questions. What does support look like for you? And really understanding, what does support really mean to them? I might think support is getting them all their tissues, diapers, and wipes, right? But that for them is not support. That's like, oh, you're supposed to do that. But support is you stopping in and seeing all the things that I did around my classroom and noticing that I'm working really hard with the kids. So learning more about how they are operating and understanding that, and how you can advocate for them and really help champion them up. And then there's so many other things, coaching, mentoring, things like that, pairing, like I mentioned before, pairing those leaders with mentors that are already within the school, because you can't do it all. That's the other thing. You're one person and you can't necessarily do it all. So finding them a buddy that could help them, and just having those check-ins, you know, set up a schedule for that mentor to check in with them to ensure that they're doing well. Employee feedback and surveys. So if you are not doing surveys, please start doing surveys. This is going to help you listen and adapt. So regular surveys, having one-on-one feedback sessions, and anonymous sessions. So I feel like when we're talking about regular surveys, I think there's a couple surveys that I would like to suggest that you consider. You know, the first is that you have a survey, like biannually would be my suggestion, at least for your current employees, the ones that are there. They can be similar in some areas, but I think they should differ. So it's almost like 50% of the survey might be the same every 6 months, but then the other 50% might ask and touch on different questions to kind of in a year glance get an idea of what's going on. And you should aim to get at least 75% back in feedback, because if you get anything less, you're really not hearing from the group. You're hearing from the noisy people, usually the loud ones that are upset, and the ones that are like over the moon, so happy. So you really are aiming to get that middle ground people that will kind of help give that realistic, you know, glimpse. So when you're doing surveys and you're setting up these regular surveys, especially for those every 6 months, those ones that you're going to do every 6 months annually, that you are explaining to them, we need 75% of our staff to get back to us, and keeping them updated. Hey, we're only at 50%. Hey, we're only at, you know, 25%. It was the saddest thing one time we sent it out, and I think we had 13% of our staff that had responded. And I'm just like, holy cow, like this, we can't do anything with this information, right? So the other thing that you can do is set up at the beginning of a staff meeting, we're all going to take the first 10 minutes and fill out this survey. Or you could have somebody give them a 10-minute break. They're going to love 10 minutes out of their classroom and say, it's survey time. We're coming in. We're trying to get 75%. You don't have to make it mandatory, because you don't necessarily want to force somebody to do something, but at the same time, just explain why it's really important. And then what's going to help them understand that is what you do with the information after, right? So as long as you're sharing the information, giving an overview, hey, this is what we got from the survey. This is kind of a summary of where everybody's at. These are some of our action items of what we're going to do to improve in the areas, and make some immediate changes. So it will motivate them. Oh, I see, I give the feedback and they do something about it. The other surveys that I would really empower you to do is do a 2-week survey on new employees, and just send it out, have it automatically within your systems. Usually your CRM systems, your hiring systems can do that. If not, you can set a calendar reminder. But having a system where you're going to gauge within the first 2 weeks how a new employee is doing, again at 90 days for the new employees, and then at 6 months for the new employees, and at 1 year. And the reason that I look at new employees is because they're coming in with fresh eyes. they're coming in with, a different background. They might be coming from a different center. They're going to give you a lot of information and hopefully open up to you about how it's going. It might help you improve your onboarding. It might, like, Christy was saying she's struggling with like getting them in and keeping them. So some of those things might help. And then also looking at exit surveys. So if you are not doing any type of exit survey with employees that are leaving, then adding that to your list in terms of why are people leaving my company? Even if it's with one day, even if it's 6 months, 5 years, even if they've been there 25 years, you really want to do an exit survey because people will open up about, why they are leaving an organization. And it would be extremely valuable for you to learn, even if some of the things you might roll your eyes at because they will say certain things that you're like, okay, they didn't have all the information. I think it's still important to understand somebody's perspective and put on their goggles for a minute and say, wow, this is really how they viewed us. So what work can we do if we would play this back and try again to move from her ever feeling that way or him feeling that way? One-on-one, if you know me or if you even engaged with me at all, and I know that Kathy knows what I'm going to go into next, but one-on-one is absolutely essential within your organization. And if the person that is running your center is not meeting one-on-one at least once a month with all of their employees that are working, with all the teachers, the aides, that is really going to be a huge deal. The other thing is that if they continuously miss those, cancel them, rearrange them, don't ever make them up. People really want their 15 minutes once a month to have that like individual time. And if you think about it from a parent perspective, I have 4 children. If my kids get 15 minutes of just me, I mean, that means the absolute world to them. And it also makes a huge difference in how they behave. Same within our classrooms. If our teachers spend, 2 minutes, 3 minutes with one child reading a book, that makes them feel so good. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend hours. It doesn't mean you have to spend a substantial amount of time. It just means that you need to say, I care so much about you that I want to give you just, this amount of time to touch base with you. How are you doing? What's new with you in your life? And you start with those questions. It's a personal thing. Like, I'm thinking about you. What's going well? What's not going well? Is there any area that you need my support on? And allowing them to really navigate that conversation, but it's absolutely essential that that is happening with every individual within the organization. So that way you have a pulse on how everybody is doing, along the way. And I'll go back to that foundations where you can fix the foundation before it's even broken. Anonymous suggestions. So I don't know if you have any channels for anonymous feedback over the years. We had like a suggestion box, which I then turned into a QR code and a Google form. So, if you feel that there's just a way to keep a pulse on your current staff and your families, just create a QR code, link it to one of like a Google form or, a Survey Monkey or some type of survey that they could quickly just, give some, anonymous feedback. And you can periodically check that maybe on a weekly basis and be able to kind of see what people's thoughts or opinions are on anything that might be going on in your schools. Next is employee well-being and initiatives. So looking at a holistic approach to wellness, so mental health support, fitness and wellness initiatives, and stress management workshops. So I think that this is really important, and especially with recent, studies and research, there's a huge, uptick in needing support in mental health and, wellness. And so finding avenues that you can support your team in this is extremely important. It could be that you could reach out to your local mental health and wellness counselors in your area and see what services they provide. I know that some health insurance companies actually provide like virtual wellness, mental health support virtually. So seeing what your insurance companies, if you provide insurance, can offer. Or if you don't have that, ask them, what insurance do you have? And maybe just be an avenue for support to help them find those things. But a lot of times, if you're looking within your community, you're going to find somebody, and just having them come talk at a staff meeting, see if they could come and set up on a Saturday, and anybody that would want to come and talk with them, you could work with that person individually about how you could pay them. Anybody that would want to come could sign up and come, or just show up and come, to allow them maybe that opportunity. And it's definitely just something to think about. And it doesn't necessarily be something you have to do all the time. It could just be case by case. If you're starting to notice that the morale is going down, that you're just kind of feeling like things aren't, like people just aren't feeling so great, especially the winter time tends to be like the winter blues. Just like kind of bringing them in as like, I heard about this person. I'm excited to share some information with you. And again, it's just a way for you to show that you care and that you support them in all areas. Fitness and wellness. So when I was a director, we used to once a week do, it was Zumba, it was cool back in the day. And we would have a Zumba class. Like I wasn't an instructor, but a couple of us did Zumba and we all had songs that we liked. So we would lead the song and we would just hang out after work. And it was just encouraging physical well-being. Like one time we took a hike, we had like paths near us. We took a hike. So just thinking about what are the things in your area that you could do to promote any sort of fitness and wellness. Even just meeting at the park on a Saturday, if you've got staff that have kids, just saying, hey, we're all going to be here. Not always necessarily doing the dinner and drinks, thing, because that's not always pouring into that like wellness, fitness area of what we need. And I also go into this as, have you had conversations with some of your staff about what fitness and wellness and mental health really is? And stress is coming up next. Because they don't always really understand what they're doing wrong. So having that conversation and opening it up and even saying, how are you taking care of yourself? I know that if you Google, there's some things online that, you can kind of take like a personal wellness quiz, and help them kind of see like, where am I at? Am I really taking care of myself? If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. We know that quote, but sometimes these younger kids, they think they're invincible. I did. I think we all did. They don't necessarily realize that some of their habits aren't really promoting wellness. And it's actually sometimes pouring into some mental and stress, wellness issues. So educating them and helping them realize that. Stress management, so equipping them with some tools to manage their stress. A lot of this for me goes into, I feel the best way you can look at it is helping by observing and noticing what's going on with them in the day-to-day and them in their classrooms, and trying to see what might be the trigger of their stress, is the biggest thing. What is it that is really setting them off? As you do observations with your staff that seem really stressed, trying to really see and observe what is leading up to that, where it's kind of falling apart right before it combusts into kind of what seems to be really a stressful situation. And then having the conversation around, what is it that you feel is pulling you down? Then you can really help decipher what tools, what resources, and what support, you really might need to offer them. They don't always know. And I can guarantee you they don't know how to ask, because when it comes to, especially this area, it can be very embarrassing. People are like nervous, they're upset, they don't want to look like they can't do something. They also sometimes get worried that they'll get fired. It goes back into your culture of, I'm sure you have a core value that relates to, caring about each individual family. Maybe it is wellness, maybe it is support, things like that. Finding that core value that you can really tie to and say, no, this is why this core value is important to us, because we care about you as a whole person. And just being able to foster that as a priority within all of your staff is super important. All right, so that for me right now was our full presentation. I think that one of the questions, I hope that you were able to take away from all the things that we covered, but one of the questions I feel that I wasn't prepared for, because this was more about sustaining and elevating current staff, was how to get them in the door. I really believe, I just want to touch on that before I move on. I really believe that when you're talking about trying to draw somebody into your company, there's a couple things that you need to do. And a lot of that is going to be, what is your presence on social media? And what is your presence word of mouth? Because right now, that's how people get their information, is social media and by talking to other people and talking to their small circle of people, right? It's not really like that they're reaching out too much. But if they reach out to a large community of people, it's going to usually be via social media. So how is it that your word of mouth is, and what is your social media looking like? Do you just focus on highlighting the children? You really should focus on highlighting, if you're trying to pull in staff, What are you doing to have fun with your staff? Why would somebody want to come work with you? What looks exciting about this? We think that people want to just come because they love the kids, they want to work with kids. And that definitely needs to be a huge part of the reason that they're coming to you. But you have to look at, how can I start to draw them in? Like, what are the fun things that we do with the kids? You know, we have these foam parties, but look, the kids do the foam party and the teachers do the foam party. And it's like this huge fun foam fest. And so highlighting that with like a mini video, highlighting that with, you know, some pictures, something that could really help show, wow, this is like, you get to go play with kids, have fun, and this just looks like a really cool environment. Anytime that you have a staff meeting, you should be doing something, some type of team building that should be built into your staff meetings. It's absolutely essential. But you should be taking photos, videos, every single month of that happening and posting that on social media and saying, this is what we do at our staff meetings, you know, like, and they're going to be like, wow, they even make staff meetings fun. And it's just a way of showing, it's not lying, it's not deceiving, because you do. These are actually genuinely things that you are doing to have fun. And that will really help draw them in, because they're going to say, wow, this looks really, really fun. Outside of that, you need to work on your current staff and how are they communicating and perceiving your school to be word of mouth. Like, what are they saying about you? What are the conversations happening when they meet with their coworkers outside of the school? And really just working with them and helping train them to realize that they are actually part of this whole process of pulling in employees. You can do employee hire and incentives, where your current employees can get an incentive for somebody coming in. One time I printed out, they're almost like business card size. It was an advertisement with our logo or phone number, we're hiring, and it had referred by and a blank line. And we handed them out, and our teachers could put their name on it, and they could pass those out, stick them on a card. If somebody came in with that and it had their name on it, then they got a bonus. So just how can you be creative in how your teachers are getting you out there? How can you be supportive in giving them the right word language, so that way they can ensure that they are representing you in the best way possible? And so training them to understand how all of that works together. Those would be my couple things. I know recently in the academy, there was some buzz about giving a gift at the interview. I think that's another big thing, that like thanking them to come to the interview and kind of trying to give them some sort of like, you know, gesture, maybe a piece of swag, something that would get them excited about, like, wow, they gave me this, you know, thing when I came, you know, to show up. I know that we had talked at one point in our schools about giving sunglasses because we were going to make your future bright. And they were just like branded sunglasses. So something that's like, hey, thanks for coming. And, you know, you walk away with a trendy pair of sunglasses. Those things are unforgettable. How are you setting yourself apart from the other places that they're interviewing at? So that would be my, how do we pull them in kind of bit on that. I wanted to share a couple more things before I pass it back over. So again, I mentioned in the beginning, I'm part of the Child Care Success Company, and I'm a coach with them. We're the world's largest and #1 authority in the child care and preschool business, and have impacted over 1 million children. And we want to offer you something really amazing today, which is our very first training program that we've specifically designed for teachers. So if you have not done this, or your teachers have not done this, it's actually free for you for 90 days. The one cool thing I want to share, and I won't go through every single module, but you could take a snapshot of this. The reason that this is really cool is it walks all of your teachers through kind of a training and leadership building in the specifically to childcare. And the coolest thing that I've heard about this, which I helped build this, so I'm extremely proud of this, but we received feedback from schools that their state licensing agency had called this essential, and that the state representatives and licensing agencies have watched this, and they said that every single teacher should be taking this. And I think that that speaks volumes sometimes, because I feel like we can never please our state licensing reps. So if they're saying that this would be essential, you know, I think that was such a great compliment. The other thing is that a lot of our academy members have actually made this a piece of the onboarding. They have to sit down and take this course before they can step into the classroom. So looking at this as maybe even adding it to your onboarding is another great opportunity. But These will also give some of the things that we went over, especially here at the last end when I said your teachers are part of pulling in, your staff and retaining. It actually talks about that, and we cover that in the Empowered Educators. So I wanted to, share that with you today, and hopefully you can enroll, or maybe you have a couple teachers that you want to raise up for leadership. It's 100% free for you for 90 days, so check it out. So I want to end with this quote, one of my favorites. When leaders throughout an organization take active, genuine interest in the people they manage, when they invest real time to understanding employees at the fundamental level, they create a climate for greater morale, loyalty, and yes, growth. So if you don't know Patrick Lencioni, he's phenomenal. He has some really, really great books that you can follow him on. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being here with me, and I'll pass it back over to Benny.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. That was an awesome webinar, an awesome event. I'm sure people got a good amount of ideas from there. One thing that resonated with me at the end, you mentioned getting staff in the door, and I think a cool idea, I'm not sure if it's been implemented or not, is having your current staff kind of call people who apply and be like, hey, I saw you applied, wanted to tell you a bit about how it is to work here. And that can just give them another experience that's from someone that's going to be in their footsteps. Hopefully, positive reviews from your staff. So that's important of building that fostering environment and making your staff happy. But Jen, that was incredible. For those who are not familiar, Child Care Success Company, they do great work. A lot of coaching, training, conferences, really awesome stuff. And we here at Playground, like I mentioned at the beginning, we make all the operational software to help you simplify your operations. So if anyone wants to learn more about Playground, I'm happy to stick around, talk about what we do and show you a bit of our software. We're launching integrated payroll soon, if that's of interest to anyone, which means you can pay your staff directly through Playground, in addition to managing all your staff, families, paperwork, billing, all from A to Z. But that's my little gambit on Playground. And thank you everyone for joining. Jen, thank you again for that awesome event.
Does anybody have questions? I can stick around for that too if you want. Thanks,
Kathy says, Jen, you're amazing. Kathy,
Thank
am I
you.
amazing too, or is it just Jen? Am I amazing too, or just Jen? No.
You're good too.
Okay.
You don't hurt the eyes. No, just kidding.
Well, yeah, if anyone wants to stick around for more questions, please feel free. I'm going to stop the recording. Kathy, I got that on recording. No. Awesome.
Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
I did have a question. And since you're in Pennsylvania, you might be very well qualified to answer this for me. I would love, for some of the trainings that are in the Academy resource area, is there any way that some of those down the road could